Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our retrospective on what we're calling Gaslight movies with the 2016 film The Girl on the Train. This is Castle of Horror, episode 337. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. From Mendon, Michigan, Leigh Fryling is an itinerant teacher, musician, and writer, and you know her as the voice of Night of the Bookman, the audiobook from Castle Bridge Media. Hi, Leigh.
How you doing, everyone?
Hello. Leigh is covering for our good friend Drew, who could not be with us to gaslight everybody tonight. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, Leigh, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Oh, thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Okay. The Girl on the Train is a 2016 American mystery psychological thriller. And it's so funny, this is from 2016. So we did a movie from the 30s, and then we did one from the 60s, and now we have jumped forward to 2016. It is based on British author Paula Hawkins' popular 2015 novel of the same name. It stars Emily Blunt, Rebecca Ferguson, Haley Bennett, Justin Theroux, Luke Evans, Allison Janney, Lisa Kudrow. This is a heck of a cast. It follows an alcoholic divorcee named Rachel, who becomes involved in a missing persons investigation. It also has been turned into a rather new Hindi adaptation that you can find on Netflix, and I haven't watched that yet. So, all right. This movie, by the way, was a huge hit. It cost like $45 million to make, and it basically just burst the seams with people going to watch Mary Poppins be, drunk all the time. So, let's get started with our opening thoughts. Julia, you were the one who wanted to do the Gaslight retrospective. So let's start with you. We'll go Julia, Tony, our guest Leigh, and then we'll get into the topics. So Julia, opening thoughts, The Girl on the Train.
First of all, I have to say that Emily Blunt is not Mary Poppins. Julie Andrews will always be Mary Poppins. Sorry, Emily. You tried, and it was a good try, but you just did not need to ever happen, and that's just how I feel. So yes, The Girl on the Train, interesting film. It doesn't start out as a gaslight. You don't know that it's a gaslight movie. Well, I guess that's the case with a lot of these, actually. But it is one of these films where you kind of get even 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of the way through before you realize that there's any gaslighting happening. And basically, we just don't know what's going on with why Rachel is traveling on a train all the time and staring at people, how she's seeing these people from the distance that she's at, but that's a separate thing. And it's just it's a creepy film. I don't think it's super scary. I think there's a couple of moments that are certainly suspenseful, especially at the end. But it explores a lot of interesting themes. I mean, there is definitely some stuff where I was just really it made me think and feel sad and feel angry and lots of feels. So yeah, I think it should be an interesting conversation.
Very cool. Tony, so tell me where you're coming from. What are your thoughts on this film?
Unfortunately for me, this is a movie that is done really well, but it's probably not also a movie I would have actively seek out. I think it's done really, really well, but it's real in ways that I tend to not watch as much these days. Also dealing with, people I know who have been alcoholics, people I know who have had lots of trauma. I don't tend to enjoy movies that deal with it so realistically. And this does a really good job. And it's fiction, there's liberties here and there. I think the cast is great. I think it's filmed really well and everything. But I did not enjoy the movie as much for mostly personal reasons and my particular tastes.
Right.
So that's unfortunate because it is done really well, but I had a hard time getting through it. Not because it's bad, but just because that's my particular taste, and especially over the past couple of years. So I wanted to have the discussion though, because I think there's a lot to be discussed, and I think it's done really well. But yeah, it's not a movie I would revisit probably.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I want to get back in one of our topics, not necessarily to anything resolutely painful, but just how we start to turn away with movies that maybe once wouldn't have bothered us, which is something that in my endorsement we'll talk about with an essay that Leigh published recently that just ties into that. So that reminds me, by the way, what you just said reminds me of, how what we are more familiar with laughing about is one thing, and then if something hits too close, it affects us totally differently.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I were at Button-Umathon once. It was like 4:00 in the morning, and we had watched Intensity, Haute Tension. Same thing. And it was just a super violent film, didn't bother anybody. But then the next thing we watched was called Teenage Mother, which had a live birth. And it sent these dudes just streaming into the lobby. I mean, they were
and then of course, my stepdad filmed one, my brother's birth on like
holy
black and
mackerel.
white 8mm. But yeah, that's totally one of those things where everyone's like, there's decapitations and smashing and whatever, all throughout the whole thing, and then live birth is too real.
Everybody just runs to the bar.
having done it, I can see why.
Yeah.
I have very little memory of it because I'm drug sensitive, and they finally talked me into the epidural, and I was so far gone that my parents were saying, push, she's almost here. I said, what's almost here? The baby. What baby? The baby you're having right now. I'm having a baby? How did that get there?
That's not an epidural. That's a narcotic, because the epidural doesn't mess with your brain, but the narcotic does.
I do not know what they gave me, but I literally, my mom is like, that was the best part of this whole thing, was your father laughing hysterically because you did not know you were having a kid.
Oh my gosh. No, I made this stupid decision to not have an epidural with my second one, and she was huge. And then afterwards I was like, why is that the thing that we decide as women that we're going to do naturally? We do everything. We use machines and plumbing and makeup and medicine, everything else. But for some reason, childbirth is supposed to be natural. It's like so dumb. I always tell everybody, get the epidural. Don't even pretend.
I tried to do it with nitrous oxide with laughing gas, and I was getting too worn out, and the nurse was finally like, honey, you've been really brave and you've been really strong, and now it's time to go get the medicine.
Right.
Exactly.
Leigh, you're next. What are your thoughts?
Well, now that everyone knows my most personal details and stories. So I'm going to be kind of an interesting shadow to Tony, because I actually really liked the film, but I'm also never going to watch it again for reasons that we'll definitely get into. But my take on the film is two big things, and the first one is that the gaslighting is not just happening to the characters. The filmmaker is gaslighting you. They're using all of your prejudices against certain quote unquote types of women, certain types of people, certain types of situations to turn you against every single female character. And then when you get to that climax point, it flips the entire script. And that was so beautifully and cleverly done. So kudos to the director. That was awesome. And then the second thing is that, from my personal experience, and I'm sad that Drew's not here, but I'm Drew, if you wind up listening to this, I'm so glad for you on the podcast, because you advocate so beautifully for mental health topics. Wow, not good at words right now. It's not good to be on a podcast and not be good at words. As someone who experienced gaslighting in my divorce, I did a lot of watching this with my now wonderful husband, going, oh, yep, I remember that. Yeah, wow. That's true. Yep, that's how that happens. Oh, yeah. Also, damn, Justin Theroux is a good-looking man. And please stop casting him as a villain, please. I would really like one movie where he's the delightful good guy.
But that's the thing, is that because he's so good looking and sweet looking, it's hard, you don't expect him to be a bad guy. You know what I mean? So that's why it actually works, because that's how it works with real life narcissists, real life villains. It's like look at Ted Bundy. They suck you in because you're like, oh, he has a trustworthy face, a kind face. So yeah, I think that actually worked for the
Oh
making the
yeah,
character
especially with the
more real.
whole kind of flip of, and maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but the flip of you are led to believe by the filmmaker that he's the one who wants the child, and he leaves Rachel because he wants the child, and then later you find out it's flipped and he doesn't actually care about kids at all. He just wants to be in control of the relationship. So again, it's using all those prejudices you have against you. And I was that was mean, filmmaker, but also clever. So props.
So that's fantastic. So I my only opening thought, and then I wanted to follow up on something. I think you gave us a good way to maybe get into the story, because we could just walk our way through the plot, or we could talk about, I think, go by character, and I think that might actually be a stronger way to do it, because I love the idea that each of these characters kind of confounds us. But at the top, my opening thoughts, I really enjoyed this movie because I love to watch, I love to watch trashy thrillers, and then I love to watch movies like this, which are basically really dressed up trashy thrillers. I mean, like they're movies that have the basic plot of a much more pulpy story, and then it's been kind of dressed up and made into a sort of middlebrow.
It's like Pretty Women as thrillers. Like, this is Julia Roberts in the dressed up scene.
Right.
I mean, it's filmed so well, and it's got amazing actors throughout it. Like, it's done just super well. Like, if you're gonna watch a thriller like this is A game stuff. The writing, everything, the cinematography is great. Everybody's doing a fantastic job. Like, you feel that trauma in a lot of places, and everybody's excellent.
Oh yeah. Well, but it reminds me.
I agree with you
that like Joe Bob Briggs used to talk about, drive-in movies versus indoor bull stuff, was what he called it in the newspaper, because he wasn't allowed to say bullshit. But indoor movies were movies like this. All of your top stars, really expensive, everything. There's never a boom mic. This is the best that you can get in production value. And it's interesting to me that as horror fans, so little of what we talk about looks like this. Drew insists up and down, and I'm not saying he's wrong, but he insists up and down that thrillers are just horror movies. But this is the kind of thriller that really stretches that, because it's so slick that it almost feels like a totally different kind of. It's like listening to rock and roll and then listening to Quiet Storm. They're just very, very different. And I'm saying that. Why am I saying this? I'm thinking about the fact that we're a horror movie podcast, and so I'm trying to work my way around. This film definitely fits with our theme. It definitely involves some people getting murdered and smacked in the head and being gaslit, as in our retrospective. But this is a weird, distant cousin from Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. So
I think it's still a horror movie.
It's
though.
definitely
I
real life horror.
Because I mean, like, this is to me, looking at this is like, that would be like saying Rope isn't a horror movie. Like, Rope is definitely a horror movie, and all the big action happens at the beginning, and there's no jump scares. There's just nothing but this intense dread, as we walk through the twists. So I would say that this is like, I agree with Drew that thrillers are just horror movies with bow ties and fancy gowns. And this is definitely and this definitely, I think, equates as a horror movie, especially if you're a woman. And a lot of it, I'm sitting here going, that's a female lead, that's a female lead, that's a female lead. There's Allison Janney, what's she doing here? That's amazing. She's, there's a lot of characters that could have been cast as men, and they're not. And so I'm really enjoying a lot of female narrative in here. Like, yay.
That
is done really, really well. Again, it's why I feel guilty in some ways not liking it more.
Sure.
I know that's on me, but that's what was weird, was a movie that doesn't. I hate when a movie that's done really well doesn't resonate as much. And it's, you, like I said before, you bring your own stuff into it. But
absolutely.
I part of it was because of things that I've experienced. I just I don't like that this is happening this way, or why do bad people like this guy? Why do they win out all the time? And all, that's the kind of stuff that's there. But yeah, I mean, Jason even said I was like, hey Jason, I don't know, man, I'm not digging on this. And he goes, oh, there's a twist. And I was like, does the twist involve vampires, werewolves, or ghosts? Because then I might it might turn this around. I knew it didn't, but
Justin Theroux is an emotional vampire, so technically
there you go.
speaking,
Yeah,
he is. We got to talk about
That's
his
true.
character. Thank you for noting that, because I want to talk about what kind of monster he is. And by the way, to those of you who are trying to avoid spoilers,
It's too late. You just spoiled it anyway.
Let's talk about the women who are centered here, and we can kind of work our way through. Now, I'll say really quick, this movie employs a timeline thing that has become super popular in recent years, where stuff will be held back from the reader or the viewer because part of the narrative is starting from the moment that you start watching the movie and moving forward, and part of the narrative is starting at some point in the past and moving toward that moment that you began watching. And eventually the timelines, intersect. And Julia and I just finished reading another book that does exactly that. That's just become a very popular thing to do. But and then this movie does that also. But it means that it's holding back a lot of information. And we're just going to kind of throw most of that stuff clean out and just talk about it, knowing what we know about the entire story. Leigh, you had a comment about there are 3 women leads in this thing, setting aside Alice and Janney. Yeah. What's the deal with 3 women? What was your point there?
So women in groups of 3 in terms of mythology and folklore and whatnot. There are a lot of examples. So like Clothos, Atropos, and Lachesis from the Greek are the 3 fates, and they determine the length of your life, and they weave your life and cut it and whatnot. And then you have in more Gallic mythology, you have the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And I see those in Rachel is the crone. Help me, what's the character's name again?
Megan? Megan is the one that gets killed.
Megan is the maiden. Yep, Megan is the maiden. And then
So Rebecca Ferguson would be the mother.
Would be the mother, because she literally is the mother. So you have the maiden who's really, sexually available and promiscuous, and that's her purpose. You have the mother, that's her purpose, and then you have the crone, and the crone is usually like the harbinger of doom. She's
called Anna, by the way. Rebecca Ferguson. Anna.
Thank you. That was driving me crazy. So you have them, and then at the end of the movie, spoilers. You have her talking about the 3 women entwined in an endless cycle, and that's immediately what I went to was, it's because they're these 3. That's what it is.
That's really interesting, and that makes me feel like the author Paula Hawkins was probably thinking about working backwards. She probably kind of thought, how do I arrange these characters? And that's probably because that fits perfectly. Let's start with the so-called crone character that you talked about, which is Emily Blunt in the lead as Rachel, who is a girl who rides the trains every day, and basically is Julia, explain to us if you were at a meeting and you were like, I'd like you to meet my friend Rachel. What is going on with Rachel?
Well, I wouldn't describe her this way if she was my friend.
Right.
So Rachel Rachel has never been able to have a baby. She desperately wanted to. She has, for whatever reason, developed a drinking problem, and she drinks to such excess that she blacks out. So she doesn't remember what happened. She loses time. And her very helpful ex-husband would tell her that the reason she was bruised and all this is because she fell all the time, and that she was constantly making a scene, and that she got him fired and all these things. And she fully believed all that. That she broke a mirror, that she hit him, all these things. And so he begins to cheat on her with another woman, and eventually leaves her for that woman, marries that woman, has a baby with that woman, and then has the woman is also, because he's the kind of person, this is why he's a monster, he's the kind of person who makes, I guess, his wives feel like they're useless and helpless. And so somehow he convinces that his wife Anna that she can't really take care of the baby herself. I think that's the impression I get. So she needs a nanny. And so he brings in Megan, who we find out is actually somebody he already knew, probably from work, and was was sleeping with, and brings her into his home as a nanny to the current home. So that's the three women that we were just talking about. So that kind of brings us up to the point that we're at.
And Rachel, one thing I thought was really interesting was watching Rachel just obsess. This is something that I'm not a blackout drunk, but I can definitely identify, and I think all of us can identify when we start cycling on a thought.
But you're buying into the gaslighting, because that's what Leigh was saying, was that, I think it was Leigh that was saying the director was gaslighting us, because she doesn't obsess as much as you think she does. Because remember, the idea was that her obsession was that she was calling all the time, and then we find out that she wasn't calling all the time. Right. So it's actually not as obsessed as she comes out.
Because what Justin Theroux's character does is he takes Megan's contact name on his phone, and replaces it with Rachel. Mm-hmm. So he's actually carrying on an affair through these text messages and calls. It's his mistress texting and calling, but he's made his wife believe that it's the crazy ex texting and calling. So poor Rachel. And then of course he's telling the cops this, and he can show the cops, look at my phone, look at the thousands of texts and messages a day. Mm-hmm. And it's not her.
Well, that's true.
He's a waffle.
And yet at the same time, if I'm just thinking of Rachel as my friend, you're totally right, and that makes me re-examine a whole bunch of things. But we do see her, getting drunk and refreshing Facebook and reading it, and just killing herself reading the happy things that her ex-husband is posting. She gets really triggered by the ex-husband posting about the baby, and it sends her on a bender, and she's just so angry and unhappy. And by the way, I thought Emily Blunt was completely believable in this. For me, I mean, I completely thought that she, you'd really believe that she's, holding on by a thread.
Well, and it helps that she was actually pregnant while she was making this. So a lot of and then they did really good with her makeup. And then of course she's a really good actor. So you get a lot of kind of a combination of things that cause her to just seem exhausted and sick.
Yeah, what I love about that is that not only was she pregnant, but the only person who knew was Justin Theroux, because they're really good friends in real life. The director didn't even know until she got sick on set one day, and he was like, and she was like, "Oh no, you can't tell anyone."
Wow. So yeah, she's, and her thing, and this is such a great thriller setup when you think about it. A lot of these thrillers that have to give us a rear window kind of concept, you have to figure out a way that this woman's going to be looking in somebody's window all the time. And you can kind of imagine Paula Hawkins going, well, all right, so what lets you look in somebody's window and a train is such a creative solution.
Well, it's also, if you have a commute, and I mean, we don't have that in Austin, but there's tons of places where that's your commute every day. You get on the train, you go into the city, you maybe come back to the suburbs. Rain's dad made that from Long Island to New York all the time, to the city. Mm-hmm. So it is really one of those things where you're constantly like, hey, there's that house again. So it's easy to actually do. And that does make for you can do a rear window thing, but a lot of people understand that commute and that view that you see. Yeah. So it makes total sense. Also, if it takes her by this place that she's familiar with,
she used to live there.
She used to live there, so that's a place you would watch every day.
Yeah, because she lived the house that Justin Theroux and Anna live in is 2 houses down from the house that Megan lives in. So she's already staring at her old house. Plus, she stares at Megan because Megan's always, for some reason, half naked or fully naked in front of the window or on the porch. Or on the balcony.
if you had that body, wouldn't you?
Yeah, right. Truth. So yeah.
But you're not wrong in distrusting Rachel, and we're set up to distrust her from the get-go. But, Jason, you were kind of making the point that, but she does do some crazy stuff. We know that the event where she comes and picks up the baby because she just wanted to hold her and kind of wanders around, we know that happens. So she really is still unreliable. She's just not evil.
No. Right. And I want to make clear that I wasn't saying at all that I felt like she was even particularly scary.
Well, the baby thing is scary.
When she's drunk Facebook reloading, that's not scary, that's sad. You totally identify with her.
Sure. Or when she's getting the girl at the bar to go, fuck you, Anna, or whatever last
Yeah.
name is.
I think
exactly.
kind of any of us can identify. We might not actually act out to this degree, but I think we can identify with all of these emotions, which is what I kind of really dig here. It's melodrama, but it's melodrama that is so perfectly engineered that it feels very real.
But for sure, it does not feed into what's the word I'm looking for. Draw on your prejudices about the crazy ex, like that there's that show that we love, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. This idea that, and it doesn't have to be. It can be either way. Where if it's a woman and the guy is talking, he's going to call her his crazy ex-girlfriend or his crazy ex-wife. If it's a woman talking about a guy, then he's going to be like abusive or whatever. But the point is, like, you kind of are going to paint it so that you're the victim in some way. A lot of times, not every time, of course. But so that's certainly the case here, is that you're kind of going, oh, well, obviously he's got such a nice face and he seems to get along really well with Anna. So it must be her. It must have been her problem.
And he says something really awful but really true at the end of the movie. He looks at Rachel and he says, "You're like a dog. You think that if you're just good enough and you come back and you're good, that people will love you again." And that was kind of where I was in the movie, where I was like, okay, that hurt. Stop that. That's not... That's very unfair, but also very true. And that really is kind of where that Facebook thing comes from. It's like it's like she's rechecking in with reality all the time, because this can't possibly be true, and yet it is, right? I'm going to check Facebook. Yes, he really does have a baby. Yes, there really is a picture of that. How can that be true? That's not what's supposed to happen, right?
And she does make some bad decisions. I mean, clearly going and seeing Megan's husband. So Megan turns up dead. That's part of what the movie's about, is that Megan is dead. So going and visiting the husband and acting like she knew Megan, and then going to Megan's psychiatrist. Those are not good choices.
Well, that's the psychiatrist part, and we'll get to that. We should probably move to the next character, but the psychiatrist part, that's when she starts acting as a detective, essentially. That's when the mystery part of the movie kicks in.
Very twisted Miss
in
Marple.
an unhealthy way, though, I think.
Oh, for sure. And that's an innovation that these new these Gone Girl women-focused thrillers have been. They've taken the Miss Marple character and they've said, what if that character is always intricately tied to the plot, so that you are invested in the character solving the mystery, as opposed to them just skating along. I'm not saying that's better or worse, but that's the way all of these ones, work. Okay, so the next woman in this triptych, I know that we got to talk about Rebecca Ferguson as Anna, but I really want to talk about is it Megan or Megan? I couldn't work out what they were saying. It
doesn't matter. You can say
okay. We'll just say Megan. So we got Megan, who is married to Luke Evans, and she is the girl who winds up gone. But she's also a nanny, and she's one of the other narrators, because Anna, Rebecca Ferguson, is never a narrator. We have two narrators, and that's Emily Blunt as Rachel and Haley Bennett as Megan. And
Megan is the fantasy girl that Emily Blunt just watches and thinks that she has the perfect life, and that she wishes
has the perfect
she could be
life. She's 20-something. She describes herself as basically a liar. That everything that she's done in life is a lie. And she's curiously disconnected from her own life. I found her a fascinating character. I mean, the thing that strikes me is she has the same dead-eyed expression, whether she's like taking care of a baby that she doesn't really like, or having sex with any number of people, none of which she seems to enjoy. She just seems to be like sleepwalking through her own life.
Well, and the baby, we find out, as we find out stuff, we understand why both of those things are true. The reason she doesn't like watching the baby is because, number one, she lost a baby, and so it causes her grief to think about her own baby that she lost. And number two, it's her lover's baby with his wife. So that's got to be weird. And
because
then
he likes to play control games, and that is the ultimate control game.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I forgot what the other thing was you said that I was thinking. There's also a reason for that.
Dead-eyed expression, bad sex.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that she's having sex with two men, that's got to be complicating her relationship with her husband. She's having an affair.
Specifically unprotected sex. Like, she's not on the pill. They're not using protection. Like, this girl has a death wish, I think. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I read her.
I don't know what's going on with her. I mean, I think that's fair. I think she seems to feel really completely disconnected and unsure about what the heck she wants from her life. And I don't know. I mean, look, I don't know from psychology.
But it's also her way of being in control. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of cyclical, kind of very circular, like, where are you in control of your particular circumstances, and each person has their own kind of part where you put something on the map. Like, I'm in this part of the triangle, I'm in this part, and that's a thing because she's attractive and that's part of her manipulation, and because she is disconnected for a lot of traumatic reasons. Everybody, there's just tons of trauma in this movie. That's what drives it. That is a control thing. She exerts it where she can, even to her, to her psychologist. Like, yeah. So, and that is like, well, if I do this, I have this measure of control when I can't control everything else. And you'll see that kind of cycle. I mean, that's again why it's so realistic and tough, because that happens a fair amount.
And I think you're onto something with the psychiatrist, because I think the reason that I think you're 1000% correct about her level of control, and she understands that her control is physical, that she is attractive and she can use sex to control her circumstances and the men in her life, either giving or withholding it. And I think the reason that she opens up to the psychiatrist is not because she physically wants him, is because he's the guy who tells her no. He's the first person that sets up that boundary and maintains it. And so that's why she trusts him to tell him, because she can't control him. It's like, oh, I've hit a wall.
Can we dig into this relationship with the therapist a little bit?
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because when he does start to kind of go, if I do this, it will ruin my practice. She kind of goes a little crazy, because
explain to me. Forgive me, but explain to me like I'm 16, because I'd normally say explain to me like I'm 4, except for it would not be appropriate.
It wouldn't work here.
Explain to me like I'm somebody old enough to understand but too stupid to understand, which is actually a good description of me. Why is she hitting on this psychiatrist? It can't just be that he's a hot Latino guy.
No,
I mean, why?
It's just what Leigh was saying. She's trying to get control over the situation and testing the boundaries. I think that's right. That's a good theory.
Yeah, I think she's testing him, because I think she obviously does not trust anyone, because Mac, the father of her initial child, took off. Yeah. She has trauma from her brother dying. She doesn't trust men to stick around. She doesn't trust men to do what they say they're going to do. And she knows she can't trust them, because here's this married guy. Well, he vowed to love, honor, and, obey, protect, defend, whatever word we use nowadays. And there he is with her. So she's like, okay, well, I'm not going to really invest any of my truth in you, because you're a man and I can control you. And, like, honestly, this game is too easy. This game is too easy for her. And he puts up the boundaries, and he holds them, because we never actually see, there's like a little bit of kissing, but I feel like it's implied that he never goes further with that physically. He maintains a professional boundary. And that's why she trusts him and tells him her secret, is because she's finally hit a man that does what he says he's going to do and maintains the boundary against her wildest manipulations.
Mm-hmm.
So forgive me for asking this, because I've seen this movie a couple times. You're telling me she doesn't have an affair with the
No, it seems like the first time and the only time they kiss is when she kisses him on the balcony, because she's called him to say, I found out I'm pregnant, and for whatever reason she asked him to come to her instead of her going to his office, and that's why he's there. So she kisses him, but he kind of doesn't, like, I guess he doesn't feel like, because she's hurting at that moment, I guess he doesn't feel like that's a good time to just be like, no, push her away. But he also doesn't. I agree with Leigh that it doesn't go any further than that. I think that is
it becomes very brotherly. He, like, she kisses him, but more on the corner of the mouth. It's not like a full-on passionate kiss, and he holds her and he strokes her hair and he tells her that she's going to be okay. And it's because we in that little montage, we see it from Rachel's perspective, where she sees a passionate kiss, and then we see it from the flipped perspective, which is the other side, and we see that it's not a passionate kiss, it's actually an embrace, and it's a lot of grief.
Well, and I guess you're right, because there are no other scenes of them together when he's not like physically trying to beat her off with a stick.
Right.
and you know, that totally makes sense. God, what a piece of work. I mean,
it is. It's a great movie. Never watching it again, but great movie.
So yeah, Megan, so her story, you know, she is having an affair with the guy that she's basically working for. I mean, you know, she's had several jobs, and she's having an affair with Rachel's ex-husband, Tom, and she gets herself, we come to find out that things really go wrong for her when she winds up pregnant. But one of the most disturbing things, now, Leigh, you said that you were most caught by surprise with the baby story. Do you want to tell what went down, or is it too disturbing for you? You don't have to. Yeah.
So I'm going to preface this a little bit with Jason and I had just had a long conversation of how I can't handle bad things happening to children in movies.
Yes.
But this is so we're going to roll the clock back. The Megan character is 17, and she gets pregnant by Mac, who is her brother's best friend, and they've kind of come together over grief, losing her brother. And they're living in this sort of abandoned hunting lodge, and she says, you know, I thought it would be really hard, but it wasn't, because I loved her so much, which is true. You know, and motherhood is hard, but I thought it would be a lot harder than it is, and you get by really well on a lot of love.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no heat, except for the hot water heater, so she draws a hot bath to keep her and the baby warm while Mac is off getting groceries or something, and she falls asleep in the tub with the baby on her chest, and she wakes up sometime later and the baby has drowned. And they bury her in the woods, and Mac leaves that night and never comes back.
Mm-hmm.
So from a very young age, this young woman is dealing with all kinds of death and loss and betrayal, and all of it.
She was like 17, I think she says.
She's 17. She's 17. You know what I was doing when I was 17? I was still listening to Hanson, okay? So, like, 17 was, oh boy, 17.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For me, it was REM, but sure.
So it's really, again, really, really great filmmaking, because you are set up to just loathe Megan because she's promiscuous, and she's, you know, women in this society are set up to hate each other anyway. If we find the other woman, she's very attractive, and she's all these things. We're kind of set up to fight each other almost. So you're expected to hate her and to be like, you have this great life. Why are you screwing up this great life? Which is Rachel's whole thing. She's so angry with her because you have this perfect life. You're screwing it up. And then here's the flip. She doesn't have this perfect life. She has this terrible trauma. She has these horrible coping mechanisms. She has no faith in humanity anymore, and she's just kind of skating by through life from thrill to thrill to thrill as best she can.
Mm-hmm.
And she's being controlled by the same guy that Rachel was being controlled by.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tom.
That I just wanted to mention the reveal of that particular trauma with the loss of the baby. In that way, it's a lot like a lot of other a lot of movies where you put off until the last possible moment narratively that you can this big event that sort of lets a lot of pieces fall into place for a particular character. Like Julia was talking about, you know, Julia, you said her way of feeling about men and sex and babies and all this stuff. A lot of it goes back to this terrible trauma, and that reminds me of things like, you know, Prince of Tides and other stuff like this, where you put off until the last moment, and then you go ahead and you take the viewer back to the.
I like that sound
moment.
effect. That was interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, that was
good. In my mind, there was a special effect of sorts. So yeah. Anyway, okay, and that brings us to the always extremely elegant Rebecca Ferguson, who plays.
Well, hold up, Tony. I I just want to know if Tony had thoughts on Megan, because I think I talked over him, and I'm sorry.
No. I think you're right, and I mean, she is fascinating, and I think that for me, it's also kind of what you hit upon was this double-edged sword of it's harder for me growing up how I did and how, where I, being just kind of always like being the metalhead, being this stuff like, there's this flip side of, it is these women who are these kind of, they could just as easily be the PTA Pilates housewives stuck up, but as
Parents.
we find out, they all have their own trauma as well. And I think that's part of it is we see the kind of curtains are pulled back on it also kind of reminded me there's I think it's Warren Zevon song that's covered, Trouble Horse covers it, called My Shit's Fucked Up. And the refrain, part of the refrain is the rich folks suffer like the rest of us. And this is kind of in that realm because nobody's particular, like Megan has probably had the harshest overall life. Yeah. But at this point, again, everybody's kind of using their worst coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
She's using sex and whatever else to kind of gain some control over her life. When she confronts Anna and says, hey, I'm going to have to leave this job. Anna's like, oh, well, I have to do these other things. And you're like, why don't you just stay home and be a mom? Like,
or take your kid with you to the store,
right?
Or whatever you're doing.
All of this stuff, and
Farmers market.
You're really like that's maddening because you just be with your child.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, and this is okay.
I'm so excited to have you guys. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah,
well, there are definitely people who that is just what they're accustomed to, is having help with, because I know that in my family's from Central America, they had like nannies and cooks because they just have like super cheap labor. And so if you have money, if you're middle class or upper class, you have nannies, cooks, maids, you have all the things. And you don't have all the machines. Like that's the part of it, is that you don't have a washer dryer and a dishwasher. So you have people that are doing those things, but you also have all this help. And so she's just accustomed to it. And so she doesn't really know how to operate. And I think part of that is probably Tom going, you're too tired. You're too, you don't really, you can't really handle it. You really need help, because he wanted to bring in Megan and have her in the house.
I'm going to come in on the flip side of that. Because from a sociology standpoint, the nuclear family is actually a very, very new thing. Mm-hmm. Just mom, dad, 2 kids is extremely new in the course of human history. When they say it takes a village to raise a child, that's because it used to be that's what we did culturally is, mom and dads are out in the field, grandparents are back in the village, kids are in a kid gang, and kid gang goes on crazy adventures around, bothering poor cabbage sellers, and saving the world. But my cabbages, But we did. I mean, we had help. We lived in our extended family groups. It wasn't just, okay, dad goes to work, mom stays home and deals with everything. My husband and I, we just got back from visiting friends of ours who have 3 kids. Amazing family. Love them so much. They're wonderful. We just have Rosie. Zach and I can barely handle just Rosie. Mm-hmm. They've got 3 kids. I don't know how they do it. And they're not day drinking either. So I really don't know how they're doing it. And they don't, but they have a nanny. And Zach was like, they have a what? And I'm like, they have a nanny. He runs a theater, so he works at night. She's a pharmacist, but she works night shifts. They have a nanny because there's no other way to do it in the way that we've set up.
But that's working outside of the home parent. I'm talking about people who are actually still at home. Like she's at home and she still wants to have a nanny because, like I say, I think she's been either taught or raised to think that she can't handle it by herself, which I think a lot of people do feel that way.
I just want to point out, if you have the means, I would have no objection. Sure. If you wanted a nanny and we could afford a nanny, then whatever. I would stay out of that decision.
Well, right. There's again, I'm not trying to stigmatize any of that, but what I was getting at and what you were asking about is everybody. Part of the hard part I had of watching this was everybody was watching people, and you can see this, and I've known, like, if once you reach a certain age, you probably know people who always do make the bad decision, the worst decision they can make. And it's especially if it's your friends, it's frustrating, or even if it's people tangentially, or maybe even people you go, I just don't have the emotional bandwidth to constantly try to help. And you may try to help all the time. So again, watching a film full of everybody coping in possibly the worst possible ways, that's part of what made this hard. And that's what the movie is about, and that's what makes it compelling in certain ways, but also was tough. Because
you
in
mentioned
reality,
something
those
in
things
there.
don't even work out the way, I mean, they may or may not, hopefully they don't work out as traumatic as this, but with cops and such. But it's so real, and it's so part of adulthood that it's rough to watch, although done really well by all the actors and actresses who make it so real. Right.
Well, and it's another example of that gaslighting of the audience, because she says, well, why don't you just stay home with your kid? And you, the audience, may go, yeah, why don't you? Come on.
Right.
Your husband clearly makes plenty of money. Like, what's your problem? Just be a mom. Some people are not cut out to be moms, and they have kids. And there's an entire Reddit subreddit of people who not necessarily regret having their kids, but acknowledge that I had a kid and I can't handle it.
Mm-hmm. I have a good friend who's had a lot of problems, and I guess again, like I said, that's part of what, as I move through the movie, that's part of it. Because people have guilt on why, I brought this kid, I love this child, but I have a lot of problems with the fact I don't necessarily love being a mother. And that can happen, and it happens more often than we would like it to, and it's a cycle of guilt, because you want the best for your child, and then you're angry at yourself, but then you're angry that this small person that you love also makes you angry. And it's really tough. It's look, Rain and I just have cats, like, so, but I had a lot
also make you very angry.
Yeah, they can. Lucky our cat is cute. I say that often, but I grew up with a pretty big extended family, watched my cousins, watched, my nieces and nephews. And so that's not the same as being a parent by any stretch, but I have more of an understanding than if I just was like, I don't know, kids, whatever. Right. And so, all of that stuff it's very complicated, and, it alone can be traumatic. And I just, the reality of all that is clearly on display here,
And society tells us you're supposed to love being a mother. You're supposed to love your child. You're supposed to love this role that you take on. I had so many women when I was pregnant, this drove me crazy, tell me, oh, don't you love being pregnant? No, I do not. And I don't want to do it again. It was terrible. I was sick all the time. It was the worst 9 months of my life. We actually, her nickname is Lemon, because when my husband was asking me, what does it feel like? Is it a boy or a girl? What does it feel like? And I said, it feels like a lemon. It feels like we need to take this one back.
That's funny.
Yeah. And I've had friends on both sides of that too. And actually in the same kind of like talking to them, like I have a friend who's like, that must have been great that she had such a great pregnancy. Loody doo, that must nice. And then this other one like, I don't see why she has a problem. It was great. Like, I don't know. I can't mediate, but I believe both of you, because
I mean, I wouldn't touch it, boy. Like, yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that what's really interesting here is that these women seem to be often, which is not the case with Tom, because Tom is whatever the hell Tom is. I don't speak psychiatry, so I wouldn't even begin to diagnose Tom. But whatever Tom is, one thing he is not is bewildered by his own emotions. Whereas the rest of them, like us, you don't feel the way you're supposed to feel, and it is baffling, and you cope with it however you have learned to cope with things. But it seems like all of them are walking through life feeling emotions that are unwelcome, and that's just fascinating to me. I just wanted to say,
well, he's definitely, whether he's a narcissist or a sociopath or psych, whatever he is, he's definitely an abuser. I mean, that much is clear.
Yes.
And he definitely makes it sound like, oh, well, you made me do this. He's one of those, who's like, this is all your, whatever he did, he never takes responsibility for it. Yeah, but I'm just saying, you don't have to like specifically know the term, but the point is he's going to make himself out to be the victim and to not have any responsibility.
We have no evidence on display that Tom, who is so very skilled at telling people exactly what will make them feel the most the most out of control and vulnerable. We have no evidence on display that Tom is at all worried about what he is feeling. There's nothing to suggest that Tom has a moment of introspection, and whereas everybody else, they're all introspection.
Well, that's how he works. That's how people like him work. Is the self-confidence and narcissism gives them also, it's that supervillain power of what's your fear? How can I weasel into this thing that you're most afraid of or most uncomfortable with?
Isn't that amazing?
And take advantage of that and expand into that as much as possible.
Yeah.
And just
I love how we begin to find out what his deal is with him. He has told his ex-wife when they were married that she's the reason he got fired, because they were at an event at his boss's home and she threw a fit and basically smashed a platter that belonged to the boss's wife and all this stuff. And so she sees her, Lisa Kudrow, on the train one day after, now in the present day. And she says, I wanted to apologize. I meant to tell you a long time ago that I'm really sorry for how I behaved at your party. And she's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And then she's like, yeah, that, I smashed a platter or whatever. And she's like, no, you just got sick. And, you just went and laid down in the other room. And then she's like, oh, what? That's Tom told me. And then she says, Tom got fired because he couldn't keep his dick in his pants. He was a bad guy. And you're just kind of like, wait, what? And that's when the gaslight switch.
And they sell it a little bit more with a Lisa Kudrow line where she goes, if you made a scene, I would remember. And you trust Lisa Kudrow in that moment that this is the truth. And suddenly the movie, with 30 minutes to go, nearly to the end of the film, you suddenly spin. The movie spins on its axis, and we see that that's wrong.
Yeah, and that's almost reverse gaslighting, if gas dimming. Because part of the reason, and this is why this is so brilliant. The casting is so brilliant. You trust Lisa Kudrow because it's Lisa Kudrow, and we all know that she's Phoebe. Right. I love her very much. She's a wonderful actress. But there are roles that follow you, and that will color your career. And you trust her because that's Phoebe, and Phoebe would not lie to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when she says, "If you,"
nor does she have any reason to.
Exactly. Right. And the same thing with Allison Janney playing the hard-boiled detective. That character is telling the truth because that's CJ.
Yeah.
And CJ,
although it's not CJ. I did love that Allison Janney actually plays in this particular character. She's always cynical, where CJ is a very sweet person.
Yes.
This character is always because she's a detective, she's always like, I don't think I believe a word you're saying. Everything she takes it as no.
But CJ is going to tell you how it is. Yeah. And this character is going to tell you how it is. Although, can I just say, for the record, my very favorite Allison Janney ever is 10 Things I Hate About You, where she's the school guidance counselor who's writing a romance novel.
Yes, I love that character. She's so scatterbrained, or at least that's the way I remember that character.
Funny.
Yeah.
We also. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, Tony, this is something that occurred to me kind of about you and why you might not to jump into your head, but there are no good guy characters in this movie. And Tony, as we know, is a really good guy. There's no connection point for you.
Her long-suffering roommate is all we get, right?
Yep, we get the long-suffering who is Donna Summers, and you trust Donna Summers. So
and so she puts up with a lot.
Yes.
Although, as we talk through it, not having read the book, and I do feel like knowing it's a book, there's a few interactions that happen, with Allison Janney's character when they're interacting, in the bathroom. There's stuff that they build up that happen a certain way that I wonder if there's more to the characters in the book. There's just a few that I felt a little disconnected with. But, talking back through it, also, one thing we don't get into that is probably, I'm thinking about now is, we also can possibly extrapolate that part of, Emily Blunt's Rachel, her alcoholism, she may have been bad before, but certainly her ex-husband probably helped that along, or at least, if nothing else, he definitely takes advantage of it. Yeah. Which you can imagine a guy like that who realizes, if this happens, I can get away with whatever I want.
Anything. You can do anything while she's drinking.
I'm certain there's been like that leads me to believe that no matter how she coped with things before, at some point there was also a lot of, are you sure you don't want another glass of whatever, and really push that. So part of, we can extrapolate that probably a lot of her coping mechanism, especially just being such an alcoholic, has definitely been pushed, because it also gives him plausible deniability, like, my ex, like, I don't know, drunk. It gives him the ability to keep that up. So, and that's just terrible as well. Like that's
he's super enabler.
Thanks for the benefit of the doubt, by the way. I don't think I'm definitely, I have my
I think you're a good, like, Tony, you're one of the best guys I know.
It is hard. I will admit that is part of it, that it was hard to watch just trauma after trauma. That's why, like I said before, I don't really want to see this movie again, even though it's done really well. And it was hard for me to get through, especially knowing people with a lot of trauma. And as a kind of helping person, my wife and I have talked about it. Our tribe tends to be a lot of people who have had, we've all been through different things, and those you tend to gravitate towards that for whatever reason, and I don't regret that at all. But that is, and especially if it's people who sometimes you just, no matter what you do, people make the worst decisions all the time.
Yeah.
And you have X amount of bandwidth to be able to help them, and you can try, but just when it's a constant like, if you could just please get some help, and please help yourself, and be let's all help each other. And that is, I mean, I think you're probably right. That was part of the hard part of this, and why novels, I don't seek those out as much either. There's tons of, you can go to, anytime you're at the airport, you can find a lot of these, and they're compelling, and there's a reason why they sell, and good authors and everything. But those are that's not a book I'm going to pick up for my flight, right?
I wanted to talk a little bit about this Laura Prepon character, just very briefly, but really I'd like to zero in on something that you were just talking about, which is that it seems to me that other than the fact that Tom is a great danger here, it's exactly, Leigh, as you said, this seems to be a film that probably maybe speaks more accurately and more compellingly to a female audience. And I find it fascinating that, most of the characters are female. The lead detective is female. The guy is just sort of standing silently, looking like a male detective in the background. There's
looking like a male detective.
I mean,
when one is a male detective.
Well, and in a million movies we've seen, there's the dude, and then there's maybe a female character in the background to fill out the cast, right?
Yeah,
that's not the case here. Yeah, and
like a female detective.
So I'm just wondering, if you tell me that these are very, very uncomfortable situations all these characters are in, and I think the audience does seem to be primarily female, in the same way that the audience of SVU seems to be primarily female.
There's a reason they call us murderinos. There's a reason.
What is the deal with the trauma?
Not only that, Jason, but there's also the guy in the suit who is there to be the very real person who may or may not, who's you see walking behind you.
Yes.
And again, as a middle-aged guy, I don't often have that same thing, but the women in my life have to worry about that guy who's on the walk with them in the park. And that guy comes in as exactly that fear, and that, and that's uncomfortable as well. And
even though he's
entirely
entirely
as an adult,
benign, even though he's trying to help.
Right.
Yeah.
But
she doesn't know. The thing is, she never knows who anybody is because she doesn't remember anything.
Right.
So she just knows that she's seen him. And then actually he becomes an ally because she's like, I don't remember what happened, and you probably know. So tell me what happened. But it becomes less of a threat. But at the time she's threatened for, of course.
Well, the way he's introduced and the way we see him until the reveal, that's
again with the director gaslighting.
Was he was he the abuser? Was he the dangerous person? But but it's also that again is a very real thing. Hey, do I have to watch out? Do I have to look for this guy in the trench coat? And for most people, as guys, we often don't. And the fact that that's a thing, and it's upsetting. and also, but that's another kind of way that this film does exactly what it's supposed to do by having this character there for all of those. And, anybody who's, if you haven't had, trauma, like, again, some friends of mine have had really bad stuff happen by that guy who turned out to be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, these are lived experiences of women.
Sure, and it's effective in the way that they introduce him, and then eventually we see, but that's done really well. But still.
Okay, but murderinos, the idea of women and the default audience in the United States for films like this, I'm going to watch people being, people doubting themselves, people being gaslighted, women in the end turning to other women because that's who you turn to in this film. Explain to me the fascination with trauma. Is it the same thing as the fascination with horror? Is it the same thing as like, deep down, I'm afraid of getting chopped up by a crazy guy with a machete. And so I'm going to watch that in a sense to defeat that monster every time I watch it?
That's part of it, but also there is, I think, for me anyway, there's this, because even if you haven't experienced, so sometimes if you've experienced something traumatic, you don't necessarily want to see it. Like I say with my career, and my dad used to say as well, I don't like watching stuff that has immigration stuff in it, because either it's too real and I'm like, I'm already stressed out from my job, I don't need to see it also in my media, or it's unrealistic and I'm just irritated. My dad was the same way with doctor shows. He was like, I hate medical shows because either it irritates me how wrong they're getting it, or I get stressed out because it's too real. So if you've actually experienced the trauma and you're watching these things, it may be because you're trying to process stuff and it's helping you, but it may be also that you want to avoid it. However, if you don't experience it, it helps you access, at least to me, access feelings that you don't necessarily you don't necessarily experience in your life, but it's kind of, I don't know. I personally like exploring all the feelings that I can. Like, I like the depths of things. I like relating to other people. I like understanding different situations. So to me, watching something where it's like, oh, I can relate to the feeling of being scared, but I've never been in this situation. Or I can relate to the feeling of being mistreated, but I've never had somebody abuse me just this way. That's for me anyway. I don't know about other people.
That's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Leigh.
Having, again, part of the reason that this was really a great movie, and I really love it for a number of reasons, but I don't ever want to watch it again, is because my ex-husband is a narcissist and was very psychologically and emotionally abusive, and I couldn't see it because you are so close and you love this person. So how could they possibly be hurting you? It must be you. You've made the mistake. You did something wrong. You did not figure it out, or you did not see it in time. Which goes on into actually the recovery. I think I actually finally started getting better after my dad looked at me, he said, "You are a wonderful daughter and you make a horrible doormat. Please stop being a doormat."
Good dad.
And kind of the last straw was he had set up rules under which I could remain in the household, because we were living with several other people. And one of those rules was I had to go to therapy every week. And it was me that needed therapy. It wasn't him. It wasn't the rest of them. It was me. I was the problem. And my therapist had to go, was going on vacation. She was having a wonderful vacation with her husband and children. And I had told them this. I said, I'm not going to therapy in 2 weeks' time because they're going to be gone. And then a week after the appointment that didn't happen because they were gone, I was told I was no longer welcome to be in the house because I had skipped my therapy appointment.
Golly.
I said, no, I didn't. They're on vacation, and I told you that, and here's the email that proves it. That didn't happen. They said, well, you should have arranged for another therapist. You should have arranged for something else. That's not okay. And that was it. That was the last straw. That's because that's when I had an email proving that I wasn't crazy. I had an email proving that I wasn't crazy and that it wasn't me. So watching this and watching all the ways that Tom sets them all up like little dominoes of people, and he understands, and narcissists are very good at this. They understand how people tick and they understand what people want. Absolutely. And they can set up the dominoes for you Like Tom keeps Rachel on a leash. He doesn't get rid of her. He doesn't get a restraining order. He doesn't make the police lock her up. He doesn't have them take her away. And Anna can't understand it. And he's like, she's not a dangerous person. She's a sad person. He could have removed her from the situation entirely. He doesn't want to do that because for him, the power, the feeling, the connection comes from, I am controlling her. Not only am I controlling my ex, whom I have completely destroyed, and I'm still controlling. Now I'm also controlling my wife, and I'm also controlling my mistress, and I also have control of our child. So again, for him, you talk about how he doesn't really seem to feel anything. What he feels is he feels that need for control, and I think control is really the big theme of this movie. Is how do you control? What do you control? And what happens when that control is taken away from you?
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm saying is you have to be in a place where you can watch something like this and either learn from it about your own situation, or you're past some super trauma now and you can look back and go, yeah, I see how it worked in my life. But I think if you're in the middle of it, it's probably too hard to watch, I think.
I don't know. I wonder if it would have been helpful to watch that. When it was happening. Just like I wonder about the never-ending story. I wonder if there are things that if I had been able to watch them, they would have helped. Like, I know this is a movie I'll show Rosie at some point because I think it's really important to look at how do the rules of society set women up to be treated this way, because it really does. But also to be like, you see that character Tom that you really like at the beginning, and he's handsome and successful and he loves his baby girl. He's a monster. He's a predator. And here are all the ways that he's going to try and get you in his trap, and you are not going to fall into that trap because you're going to be smarter.
But I think if you're in the middle of it, you don't see it. Like you said, you see it out, from outside. If you're in the middle of it, you don't see it, so you'd probably be irritated. Like you'd probably be like, "Oh, they're just bringing it on themselves. This is their fault." Like I don't know. I just think if you're in the situation where you're still being controlled by the person, you'd have to be ready. You'd have to be ready to be getting out for you to see it as it is. Otherwise, I think you'd be like, no, this is them, or they're doing this to them, or something. I don't know. But I think Tony was going to say something too.
Oh, sorry. Yes, he was. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't know if he still wants to.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's on the flip side of all of that. Rain watches a lot less, especially real world. I mean, she doesn't watch horror with me. There's a level of violence where she kind of nopes out as well. And her thing is similar to mine, although I watch tons of just crazy stuff anyway, right? Like, I mean, if you've been listening to podcasts, you know that. But her thing is, this is in the news. I don't want to deal with any, like, I don't need this to feel like, I don't want to feel those emotions. I don't need this movie. This movie is, or not, not this movie, but a movie that you see the trailer for. Yeah. She goes, who's this for? Because I don't want to feel any of that. Like, I don't want to go through this terrible divorce. If it's a movie about that, I don't want to, like, I never watched that movie. I need that to, she goes, I don't feel like I need a movie like that to feel these things. Like, I have an idea that that's bad, and I don't really want to. It's not it's definitely not a head in the sand thing. It's just, I feel enough things. I don't want to feel those things. And I agree with her there too. Like that, I think that's also a way. But Julie, what you were saying, where you're like, hey, I want to feel this range of emotions, and I think that's valid, but I tend more towards, especially the realism. Like, I don't really want to feel that. Like, I have a good idea.
Well, there's things that you
all
don't
the
want to.
responses are valid, right?
There's things that you don't want. Like Jason and I had a difficult time in our marriage, and so I had no interest in seeing that movie with Jennifer Aniston and what's his name that played What's his name? The divorce movie that Jennifer Aniston did?
No. Are you talking about the one with ScarJo?
No, you're right. It is ScarJo. Thank you. I'm glad you're correcting me. Yes. Yes.
Oh, The
yes,
Holiday? That one?
No, it's called.
One where she and Adam Driver are getting a divorce, and it's just a nasty divorce.
The marriage. Yeah.
Something. I don't know. Whatever it was. I don't know if it's called The Marriage or The Divorce or something. But anyway, that one apparently was just really brutal and I was like, I don't need to watch that because I know what that feels. I know what it feels like to be on the precipice of getting a divorce. And so therefore, I don't really need to feel that. Like, that was the thing I felt, but if it's something I've never experienced, sometimes I don't want to experience, like, I don't want to have all the experiences. But there's a lot of things where I'm like, I would like to explore that kind of part of my of humanity, I guess I should say. And you know, I don't know, it's just interesting. But that's just a reason. It's not necessarily.
But that is also why I tell somebody, like, I'm not here to be the arbiter of what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me I am uncomfortable with that, I try really hard. You know, I certainly the older I get, I'm not going to go, well, you're missing out. Like, I'm not the one to tell somebody that. Like, that's kind of on them, and like your comfort. You know, everyone's comfort level. Everybody has different parts that they want to deal with or not, and I'm certainly not like that's up to the person. And it really bugs me when people try to, you're missing this. Like, but am I?
Yeah, you don't have to. That's for sure.
At the same time, it's a really, at the end of the day, it's a story. And it's a really important story because these stories, three of them, because these are things that happen to women all the time.
Sure. Right.
You know, do I want to watch stories about people? I'm not going to watch the Underground Railroad series because I have a lot of empathy for that story and the horrible things. Like, I teach the Holocaust every year that I teach world history, and every year I cry. Every year it rips me apart what happened to these people. But I know how important it is to tell my students that story because they need to understand. So if it takes dressing up these real things that we deal with as a thriller to get people to go watch it, hey, great, awesome. Does it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, I mean, we said it millions of times that horror, thriller, campfire tales, right? From the beginning, they are to tell us a tale that is a mirror for us to look into and be, you know, abstracted. And again, maybe that's part of it, is since I'm not as abstracted, perhaps that's why it works or doesn't. Parts of it work or don't for certain movies. But you're absolutely right that by no means am I saying, oh, this is not valid or you know, it shouldn't. Why are we making these things? Because obviously you hit it right upon. Like, this happens. Like, we should see this happening. We should show people that, you know, relate. It's especially because this, you know, there's way more brutal and worse. You know, there's movies that I really, really won't see. That deal with the brutality in a way. And I've had people go, oh, you should still see this. It's like, no, I don't want to. Like,
Tony, I'm with you completely. Yeah. And we encounter a lot of those guys because we're part of the horror community. You encounter a lot of those guys depending on what's showing on Joe Bob or what have you, where people go, but you're not you know, essentially suggesting you're not a real fan if you don't want to sit through.
Yeah. Also, I don't have anything to prove.
On the real fan thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything to prove for that. Like,
exactly. You know, it's
sure.
your damn
also,
life.
That's the joy of being, you know, if you're truly an adult, you can just go, all right, like, you know, fine, I'm a poser.
Rock on with your bad self. Go ahead.
I mean, Julia gets the pass card on this. Julia got dragged into all this. This is not a chosen path for Julia.
Exactly.
Can I just point out that I there are definitely things I don't want to see. I don't like, you know, I'm not a Walking Dead fan because to me the philosophy of the show is too dark for me. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it doesn't work for me. I don't want to see it, and that's cool. You know, but I love things like this. I love trashy movies. I love melodrama.
What is it about The Walking Dead that I don't really know enough about it to know what it is that you don't like about it? Like, what is different? Attempts
at solving your problems with compassion in The Walking Dead are always punished by an invisible and cruel God. In other words, there's a there's a cosmic thumb on the scale in The Walking Dead.
Also, I mean, the flip side of that is nobody really tries things that actually a normal person would do.
I'm not knocking it as a philosophy.
I watched most of the show. I need to get caught up on it, actually. But there's plenty of times where I go, why would you do the dumbest thing? Like, stop doing these. Just why? Why is you, like, you've been smart so many times. Why this? And that's the part that just makes me
to answer your core question, though, Julia, it's very nihilistic. It's very hopeless.
It is.
It's very, you can do everything right. and you're still going to get a baseball bat to the face and die.
The only reason
Well,
I can't watch this is
yeah.
because I can't see Denny be evil.
Well, the
Right.
other part is I understand why it works and why fandom is, but I also get sad sometimes when like that guy's not a good guy. Why are you just I'm really into this person who's evil and he's so cool. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
I have been that
like
person. I have been
But-
that person who's like intrigued by the bad, like the bad boy or whatever. And it's just a thing that happens. But
There's a
since,
difference between intrigue and hero worship.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
But there
that's
was
what bugs me.
but that was I'm a Grey's Anatomy fan, and so Denny from Grey's it's not okay for him to be that bad.
Well, anyway, it's not to my taste, and that's fine. But I find a lot of times I love these trashy movies, and to me, I've realized lately that there's a gendered element to that. To me, watching a movie like The Valley of the Dolls that centers 3 women and tells you their story without really giving a shit about the men who move through their lives, to me is a lot like watching Star Trek or something. It's another planet. I mean, it's another world that I don't know, and so it fascinates me.
It's just the reverse of the world. It's just the reverse of the world, Jason, because Julia and I watch all these stories where we are watching Star Trek, and it is about Kirk and which alien he can bed tonight.
Right.
And she has a single name, no last name, no family, this is the reverse. This is what happens when you flip the script, and now it's women, and the men who float through their lives don't matter quite so much.
Right.
And it's weird for me. It's refreshingly weird. But it's weird to watch a female and like, it was almost sad to me that the immediate thing I noticed was it was a female-centric movie. And I was like, that shouldn't be not normal. That it should be normal that there are movies that it's all about the female perspective. That's not, just someone trying to pass the Bechdel test so they can get an Oscar, right? There should just be media out there that's women's stories told by women.
This passes it, right? I'm thinking there's a
this
colors.
This
I imagine,
out of the water.
I mean, admittedly, Tom is a major character. They talk about him a lot, but these women are concerned with their own stories. Tom's the monster, and okay, we should get to since we are winding our way fairly slowly through a pretty quick moving thriller. We should talk about where this actually goes. I mean, how we find our way to wrapping up Tom's story. Ultimately, what this becomes is a murder mystery. That's what's so crazy, is you get so caught up in the characters here that you forget that the story functionally is a murder mystery, because Megan disappears and then turns up dead. And
right.
Although you don't even know that she's dead until halfway through the movie.
Yeah. It's really an unusual film in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, with the poor choices that Rachel makes, Rachel realizes that it becomes quite certain that Tom has killed Megan, and also Anna also knows this deep in her heart, but is not ready to accept it yet, because Anna finds Megan's phone among his belongings. So she realized, and then she figures it all out, but she's not ready to accept it. She's not ready to leave him, which again is a very real choice. It's very real to go, I can't accept that the person that I love and the father of my child is a monster, so I'm just gonna pretend I didn't.
She can't leave anyway. She has all this money, she has this beautiful life. She can't handle her kid when she has every resource available to her. She's not going to be able to leave. That's what I'm saying. There's
a million reasons why she doesn't think she can leave. So, and then you've got Rachel who goes, oh, he killed Megan. I think what I'll do is go up and start screaming at him that he killed Megan. Like, really? That was not the best choice. And I get that she's not, that the detective doesn't really believe her, but I still think that wasn't the best choice to just start yelling at him. You killed her. I know you killed her. So of course what he does is grab her, pull her inside. And now he's got the 2 women and the little baby girl. And he's trying to figure out, how can I regain control of the situation? But no matter what he's going to do, it's not going to be good. So it's very that's where it gets.
Oh my God. When he had the baby, when he was holding the baby, and she just kept asking, please give me the baby. I was like, nope.
I know. That was terrifying. Wow. That was such a the whole thing is scary. The whole thing. And then, Rachel's standing up for herself. So he smashes her across the head with a glass. And the whole thing is just terrible.
And we see him do several violent things like that along the way. He whacks her across the face with a keychain, really injuring her.
Well, that was earlier on. That's when when he kills Megan. I mean, that's right before he kills Megan. Yeah,
he kills Megan because she says, "I'm pregnant," and he says, "There's a bunch of stuff," and then it's eventually, "I think it's wise for me to kill you now." I mean, that is.
Well, and again with the bad choices, where he's clearly not okay with this and is in a violent space. She's lying on the ground. He's already thrown her against a rock, lying on the ground, head injury. She goes, "You're not going to be able to get away. I'm gonna get all you get.
You're gonna pay for this child for the rest of your life.
Why are you talking right now?" Shush. And of course he kills her, which
that does play into her character, where there's a certain level of nihilism to her.
Yeah.
As we've seen throughout. So it's actually, again, poor choices, but choices made that fit the character together. And
the character doesn't believe that this guy's a murderer. None of these people believe that he's going to murder them right now. I think certainly Rachel should believe it because she knows he killed Megan, but Megan doesn't believe that. She doesn't think this guy that I've been, having this affair with is now going to murder me. That's just not where she's at. So
it is shocking. It's a shocking crime.
He has to kill her because now he can no longer control the situation, right? Mm-hmm. He can make Rachel look like this horrible alcoholic monster, and everyone feels sorry for him because his ex is crazy. And he's got the beautiful wife and the beautiful baby and the beautiful home, and he has to protect that image at all costs. And now he's got potentially, an illegitimate, that's a bad word, a child out of wedlock. And he can't, there's no way to hide that. There's no covering that up. There's no making Megan look like some sort of horrible person because he made the choice to have unprotected sex with her. So that
and to have her as his
get
nanny.
rid of her. He has to be gone. It has to not exist anymore, because it's going to crack that foundation. And if he doesn't have the illusion of everything's fine, everything's perfect, he can't keep playing his manipulation games.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It is kind of interesting to me how in a movie like this this is not at all a complaint, because I'm describing how when mechanics click in, it doesn't mean that's bad. It just means that we're discussing it and how it works. I say that because I don't want people to think that just because I'm labeling something that I think it's not disguised well enough. But the movie, at the point where he drags her, she says, "You killed Megan," he drags her into the house. That is the point at which the movie finally clicks into a much more recognizable Act 3 of a thriller. Mm-hmm. This could have been a million other movies, and now we're in a place that just looks we get really good stuff because it continues to be well done, because now we see Tom revealed as the real demon that he is underneath. He gives his monologue about how bewildering it is to him that people are so pathetic, and we wind up with a lot of violence, and then Rachel fleeing outside, but she takes a corkscrew with him, and then fairly quickly she manages to just corkscrew him in the neck, which is
delightful irony.
Well, and then the wonderful bit is
that's true.
Is that Anna sees that he's going to kill her, goes outside, sees that he's bleeding out, and rather than just go, "Okay, I'm gonna
call
the police or whatever," she decides to go ahead and twist it. So she's like, "No, I need to be a part of this," which is a really interesting choice. I was really surprised by that choice. That she's like, "No, I also want to have responsibility for him dying," which I don't know. I'm not sure what to make about that.
Go ahead and explain it to me, because
I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It just seems like she's decided that if she doesn't take part, then it continues to be Rachel as the crazy one or whatever, and it really needs to be that no, he deserves this. But I'm not really sure. I'm curious what you guys think.
I've got big thoughts on this one. So Tony, what do you think?
I thought it was more like, okay, well, screw you totally. Like I'm getting in on this because you're just such a bastard. Mm-hmm. Although I was afraid at first when she's on the stairwell, kind of watching, that somehow she might be in some ways complicit, or just
absolutely
so much under his spell that she's just gonna let this happen,
let him kill her.
And that was really, I was like, no, that would be truly terrible. Like she, is she that much under his control. And I think that is part of that is this release of being confused and also having all these emotions. And then, wait, this is a person I love. I'm watching this unfold. I can't believe this is even happening. This doesn't even feel real. And then once it is real, just like, okay, you know what? This is it. And I think that's part of why that plays out the way it does. I was surprised and just like, yeah, go.
Her character has to do a lot.
That.
I mean, Rebecca Ferguson has to have her character do what amounts to a complete 180 to all the way to, I believe Rachel now. I believe that Tom is a monster, and yes, I'm totally fine with joining in his somewhat ritualized murder.
But I accept it because she had already believed it, but she hadn't really.
And I've internalized it, and I'm ready to act out on it. Yeah,
and okay. So that's what I meant when I said I have big thoughts about this. So tying it back to the Greek fates, right? All three of them are connected to Tom's death. So again, it's that closing of the circle, the three women together close his life. But from an emotional, psychological perspective, her doing that is both an acknowledgement. It's the ultimate I believe you to the other victim, but it is also the ultimate making amends. It is I was complicit in some of the things that happened to you, and this is the way I'm going to make it up to you. I'm not going to let you go down alone.
Good, I like it.
Because you've been alone in this whole entire thing, and you were right the whole entire time. And the least I can do is protect you now.
I like it. Yep.
Which she does. They go in and they have that long look at each other when they're being booked in.
Yeah.
And that look is a look of complete understanding and
solidarity
and sisterhood, and it's a complete
that's how we close out, is her telling Allison Janney everything she said was true, he was horrible, she was right. Yep.
And here's all the proof, here's everything I found, here's everything that I knew. And Allison Janney does this God, she's a great actress. She does this wonderful tightrope walk of hard-edged detective, but very female, because there comes a point where she's talking to Rachel and she's kind of doing the hard-edge thing, and then she softens down. She goes, "It's okay. You can tell me. You can talk to me. It's okay." You're never going to hear that.
But I didn't actually. That made me really uncomfortable when she's in the bathroom with her. I felt like that was super manipulative. Yeah. Because she touches her arm, and I'm like, "Don't touch her. You're just totally."
No. She's using all the feminine tricks to do her job. But again, that's kind of the point. But when they're talking to her, you can see it in Allison Janney's eyes going, I thought so. She believes them. There's no, oh, you're in this together. There's no, it's a conspiracy. There's no lingering doubt. You can see in Allison Janney's face, shit. Yeah, it's another one of these. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and of course that by the time you're there in the story, if you're Allison Janney, that's the solution that makes the most sense, because a conspiracy between Rachel and Anna is extremely unlikely. It's almost guaranteed not to have happened.
And she's not invested in any of it. She is literally trying to just get at the truth. So she's like, okay.
Yeah.
And again, it's that maiden mother crone circle.
I really love that. I want to remember that, because
actually I'm glad I didn't decide I don't know if this is for me, because I think that's awesome, and I'm also, as a mythology buff, angry at myself for not seeing that. So I'm really glad you brought it up, and I'm like, oh, well,
Lee,
it's like that's the way.
I love it because it fits so perfectly, because Megan's whole purpose is she's promiscuous. She brings sex. She brings fertility. She brings all of that. So she brings danger with her. The maiden is a dangerous figure. And then you have Rachel, who is the crone, and the crone brings wisdom and knowledge. And this whole movie, you're not trusting Rachel, but she's the one who actually has all the puzzle pieces. She has the wisdom and the knowledge. And then you have Anna, who at the end, as the mother's job is to protect and nurture. And there she is at the end, protecting and nurturing, doing
her baby,
her job.
and her baby and Rachel, in a sense. Well, but what's interesting about this crone as somebody who brings wisdom and knowledge is that because of the gaslighting aspect, you have kind of this fantasy, although I think of it less as fantasy and more like a comic book concept. The hero that has amnesia, basically. The hero who is kind of buried under a spell that needs to be broken before they can reveal who they are and all the secrets that they know. Julia, welcome to the end of the Gaslight retrospective. Final thoughts. You can talk about the retrospective or just this film or whatever you want.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that Leigh was here for this. I think you've added a lot of great insights and perspectives to it, a lot of things I hadn't thought of, so I appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
And as far as the retrospective goes, I think a lot of it's been very cathartic for me because I haven't had, thankfully, a partnership where I had somebody like this, but I have experienced it in another kind of setting. And so for me, it was very cathartic to kind of look, and I'm well past it now. I'm not in it. And so it's like really good to look back on it and go, yeah, I see how all this was working in that setting. But also just, I think this film, there's so many layers to it. It's been really interesting to explore some of them. I'm sure we've missed some things. I love the set. We didn't talk very much at all about the psychiatrist. I really like Edgar Ramirez. I think he's fantastic. He's a really interesting character. I love his house. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright house that he lives in.
It's so cool.
And it's gorgeous. So there's like a lot of things like that. The set, the view that they have from the house supposedly of the water and the train and everything is gorgeous. The view of New York, all the things. So the set pieces are beautiful. There's a lot of great things that we didn't talk about, but I think we talked about a lot of the important themes, and it's been a really interesting conversation. And I'm glad that we did this film and this particular retrospective.
Thank you. It is so funny to think that we didn't. We almost didn't touch at all on the visual aspect of this film, which, so it goes. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Like I said, I was really concerned going into this because we haven't done an episode with Leigh. And so I was like, I don't want to do a movie that I don't like that much with the new, guest host. Like that doesn't sound fun. But I am glad that I stuck it out and we talked through a lot of these things. I think it's a good conversation. Again, not a movie. The reasons it doesn't resonate with me are my own and not the fault of anyone making the film, right? Like it does all the things it's supposed to do. Having not read the book, I can't tell, how faithful it is, but I assume if it's like the book that that's exactly the thrust of how this is going to go. I think it does all of that. It does it really well. Everybody's on point. As far as acting, it is beautifully shot. There's a lot of really effective cinematography in it. It has this flavor. The color grading gives it that kind of very melodramatic feel as well, and how they choose to do all that. I understand why it's good at the things it does. But I don't know if I've watched again, but I am really glad I had the discussion. Also, though, I wish at the end of this retrospective, Julie would have gone, I didn't really push for this anyway. Like, I don't know where you all thought of, I was in charge of this gaslighting thing. Like, you brought it up. That would have been perfect. Yes. And we're like, no, but you can't prove that. I don't have any emails on that.
Tony, you have to do this.
That would have been amazing. Just like I don't know why you're asking me about the Gaslight series, because Jason, you came up with this.
It was funny how easy it was for all of us, like last time and the time before that, to start coming up with Gaslight things that we could do. I was like, wow, this is really scarily easy to come up with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is, but that would have been perfect if you'd come in with I don't know where you got that it was my idea. I mean, it was fun, but I would have done something different. But yeah, I am really glad that I'm really glad to have the discussion, even if it's a film I probably won't watch again, just for my own personal reasons.
Thank you very much. Leigh, first of all, thank you for being with us. What are your thoughts?
Thanks for having me, guys. You've been just lovely. This has been so much fun. So nice to talk to other grown-ups.
I have been there. I remember those days.
Well, I work with teenagers, so it's like I talk with half grown-ups all the time. It's really interesting. So as far as the retrospective as a whole, I'm really glad you guys did this because I'd never seen Gaslight, even though I was very familiar with it out of my psychology books, but never seen the movie. And then Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, boy, that was awesome. That was so great. My husband was sitting next to me, and he's wonderful. He humors me, and he's watching. And he's like, "Did that just happen? When was this made? Isn't this from like 1930? They can't do that. Wasn't there like a code thing, a hay bale code thing? They can't." Like, no, babe, this is 1964. They can do whatever they want now. This is the world of the 60s. So thank you for introducing me to three really awesome films. Final thoughts on The Girl on the Train. She lies to us one more time at the end. The ending monologue goes something along the lines of, now I take the train, but I sit in a different car and I look ahead because I am not the girl that I used to be. But she lies to us because we see her in the same car, looking at the house, looking away from it eventually, but looking at the house. Even though she knows there's no one there, Megan is dead. And I think they do it on purpose because you will never be able to not look back. That those things they will follow you forever. They're a part of who you are. And you will never stop thinking about them, even if you think you've become a different person. Even if you've remade your whole life, those things will follow you. And I know because they follow me. So I think that the fact that she lies to you at the end is the most honest thing that the film does for you, and I really appreciate it. It was a great film. Like Tony, I never want to watch it again. I don't want to go back there. But Julia, you were saying, if someone in the middle of it isn't going to want to listen to this because they're just going to say, oh well, this isn't real, it's not me. But for me, there were lots of little stepping stones toward reality. So what I hope for with films like this, because it is a thriller and it's a great thriller, it's very Hitchcockian. And the colors, you're right, Tony, they're very saturated, they're very rich and deep, and it was beautiful to look at. Do I have friends that'd be like, hey guys, I have this great thriller you should check out, and they'll go, ooh, a thriller, and they'll go, yes, and watch it. Do I always have this little hope at the back of my mind that they'll watch it and go, oh, I am sometimes a shitty human being like that, and I should maybe not do that. Or maybe they go, oh, that's a real situation that a friend of mine is in, and maybe I have a little more empathy for that now. Or maybe they look at the beautiful girl that they hate and maybe think twice about hating her because they don't know what's going on behind that perfect girl. I hope those things. I really do. Yeah. So I appreciate that movie's out there. I'm glad you made me watch it. Jason, I forgive you.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad.
and yeah, it's just been really fun to put on my analytical cap again. And Tony, I really appreciate that you don't like it and it doesn't resonate for you, because that's also a very important lens to bring. So this was great. This is awesome. Yay.
Thank you.
I say that too because I think part of it doesn't resonate because it is too real. Like
too
so
real.
I go
job.
back. Like I guess it's not that it doesn't resonate at all, because that's in fact just the opposite. But it becomes so real that I it's hard to sit through, and I think that was my main thing. So perhaps I misspoke. It does. I guess it's not one where I want to relive that because parts of it are so in the news, and knowing having a level of empathy where you're just like, oh, I can't, this is such real life that boy, I don't like that. But I think you're totally. I agree. I think you're totally right that part of the storytelling on through the ages is let's have these things exist because it needs to hit the people it needs to hit, and it needs to evoke the things it's supposed to evoke. So I totally agree with you there. And hadn't thought about that as much as I was watching it, and kind of texting a couple of things back and forth to Jason, like, I don't know, but I think that the discussion about that is also interesting, and that's part of why we do the show, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about Luke Evans at all, and I think we just need to shout out to him for being a really good actor, because he managed to be absolutely terrifying, and you still wanted to snuggle him all at the same time. So good job, Luke Evans. That was great.
I did not have those feelings personally, but
well, it didn't. It's
and
not
it's fine to admit if you do or don't, Jason.
Absolutely,
it's a safe.
But I didn't. Luke Evans does nothing for me. It's
He's more of an Edgar Ramirez guy.
right, exactly.
No one's gonna judge one way or the other. I can tell you this.
I loved Luke Evans in. I'm sorry, Edgar Ramirez in the Versace thing. The that was really cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
really
wait, was that him?
Yeah, that's him.
That's why he looked familiar, because the Versace thing was amazing.
Yeah,
I was like, why do I know this guy? He's amazing. That's why.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mystery solved.
Mm-hmm.
You're quite welcome. I also want to say, even though we didn't really talk about it, I love this movie's look. I could watch, if you said, "Oh, it's a movie that looks just like The Girl on the Train." I would totally watch that film. I love stuff like this. So this was right up my alley. I love melodramas because I love movies of regular people acting badly and
Is that why you kept using the word trashy? Because you kept saying, I like trashy movies. I'm like, what does he mean by trashy movie? Because I don't feel like this is trashy. Some of these people are trashy. When
I say trashy movie, I usually mean a melodrama, a movie where characters act a little beyond the everyday expectations of real life people. So they'll reflect real things, but it's heightened, and that's why I love Valley of the Dolls. It's a melodrama, but the reason why I love it is it still reflects real emotions that people could connect with, and so that's one of the facets of my fascination with horror movies is this sort of odd side of just movies where there's very little of a traditional horror element. And what there is people being horrible to one another. But I feel very much like Tony in that I get off the train as the movie approaches more and more reality. So, I wasn't interested in watching The Marriage Story. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's wonderful, but it sounded too rough.
If you've been there or close to there, it's going to be another, oh boy, didn't need to go back there again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm always reminded of my mom, who had this really harrowing experience with a tornado that destroyed the house that she was in, and yet she loves tornado movies because they're always crazy. She loves like a fantasy version of a tornado in the movies.
I always joke with Rain because she is not a horror fan. She did like stuff at one point and definitely eschews really violent things, but loves just disaster movies.
Yeah.
Which have an untold number
which are just horror movies with a lot of wind and water.
Exactly.
Right.
And yes. I always joke, and it's also funny because she has to do a lot of planning.
Horror movies in a scuba suit.
Exactly. She does all this GIS and planning and all this stuff that's related, and in a way it is like the worst possible scenarios of all of that. And we always joke together. It's like, but yeah, she's like, yeah, but most of the violence isn't right there. It's not close. It's not personal.
And that's a good example of what I'm talking about when I say that if you're in the middle of it, because remember all the pandemic movies, people would watch the pandemic movies and I'd be like, why are you watching that right now?
Yeah, no, I was about...
No way!
I didn't want to rewatch those.
No.
But I just loved it. I'm like, millions of people or thousands of people die in this. She's like, yeah, but I'm not watching that in a way like you're so abstracted and and those are like Geostorm is kind of trashy,
Sure.
It's like, oh, but if it's on TV, I'll pass by, I'll come out, I'm doing something like Geostorm, huh?
Millions of people die, but they're not real people.
Right.
It is very difficult anything that we say to differentiate these experiences can still be picked apart. Somebody might go, oh, well, this movie's a good one. It doesn't count in your definition of trash, or this trashy movie actually made me feel, connect with it because it felt very real to me in certain aspects. So we can only see through a glass darkly. We can't really get at why any particular piece of art really resonates with us or why we reject it. I think we know because of this soup of reasons. But
we can only see through a glass darkly. Did you just make that up? Is that a thing?
No, I didn't make that up.
No, that's a thing.
What is that from?
Shakespeare, I think.
Oh,
no,
sure.
I saw my life as through a glass darkly. Part of it's from the Bible, and part of it's from. I'm going to look it up now. It's going to bother me.
I apologize.
That's really cool.
For
I didn't know that expression. It sounds really cool.
That's so sweet of you to think that I would be that smart.
Through a glass darkly from the Bible. 1 Corinthians. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as I am also known. So it's talking about
Cool.
death.
Well, to be fair, Jason, I have in the past gone, did you just make that up? And you said yes. So it's not it's not that you can't make up stuff that I think is cool.
It's all about selling it, right? Like, that's the thing. There was something
As long as you look like you know what you're talking about.
Right.
I already screwed it up by saying I thought that was Shakespeare. So what are you gonna do? You know, so.
Yeah, but he stole a lot of stuff, so you can be forgiven for that.
Yeah.
First Shakespeare, chapter 4.
Well, I mean, I remember learning that Shakespeare had a lot to do with the drafting of the King James Version, but I have no idea if that is true or not. So I will let. I remember
learning that Shakespeare didn't actually write anything that Shakespeare supposedly did.
We have to get into this.
So you're an Oxfordian. Well, we can have a whole another podcast about this, friends.
I have no opinion.
Okay. I don't find it. I mean, who?
But back in those days, it was called torchlighting.
All right. Let's get our endorsements. I'm dying to know, what you would like to recommend, what you've been watching, listening to, what you think people should follow your advice and go seek something out. And if you've been like me and on midnight calls all week as we try to roll out a major OTT service at Charter Cable, I don't know if I will necessarily have anything. So luckily I go last, and but all right, Julia, do you have anything to endorse this week?
Well, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to double down on what I said last week, because I said I was starting to watch the Sons of Sam documentary on Netflix, and I was like not ready to commit to endorsing it. But yes, it is good. It's really interesting. There's all this. Oh my gosh, I was getting so excited, going, like every like 20 minutes or so, they'd introduce another thing, and it'd be like, oh my gosh, how is Scientology going to play a role in this? Oh my gosh, Satanism. Oh my gosh. Like I was like getting so into all the stuff that's going on. It's a documentary basically from the perspective of a journalist who became obsessed with the Son of Sam murders. And he has passed away, but Paul Giamatti reads his notes and articles and things. And it's just really interesting, all the different bits and pieces that come together around these murders and the cult that David Berkowitz was allegedly part of, and all this stuff. It's just really interesting. So I recommend that. And then the book that Jason and I just finished reading for a book club that we're in is Where the Crawdads Sing.
Good
and
one.
Jay, do you remember who the author is? Or Leigh, if you know? I'm just. I can look it up.
It's been a long time.
It's slipped my mind for right now. So,
but it's a great book, really interesting. A lot of the themes actually that we were talking about here,
Delia Owens.
Yeah, a lot of the themes that we've been talking about today play in here, where it's female centered. It's a woman who is a victim who then turns around and makes herself the heroine and is like empowers herself. Nobody gives her anything. She just builds her own whole life, and it's just a really interesting story around not allowing yourself to be victimized by the men who are going to try to control you and that kind of thing. So actually, it's kind of interesting to look at in light of what we've been talking about. So yeah, great book.
Thank you very much. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, I'm sad because when you said the name of that book, all I could think of was I wish that was a Muppets thing where the crawdads sing.
Yes,
it would make a great Muppet skit.
Why are there so many?
It's a great idea.
We've been watching a lot of Muppets stuff, so that's been. I started watching the new MODOK series, and that's pretty funny.
Is it any good?
I like it. There's one episode especially. I think I wanted to like it a little more than I do, but I think it's pretty solid. There's one episode that also has some deep cut villains in the Marvel universe that really kind of made me happy, and the way they're portrayed is really great. I think that one carried it pretty well for me. I'm also really stoked because I just saw there's a film company is going to re-release Ricky O, the story of Ricky, which is just a hyper violent 80s action movie. It's insane. came from a manga. One of the goriest, most ridiculous. All the violence is super over the top, but I wish that company who made Riki-Oh had done a Fist of the North Star live action, because they would have done it really well.
Absolutely.
But
they definitely would have outpaced the Tony Randall version, that's for sure.
Ooh, we don't talk about that. Oof, that was rough. But I am stoked about that. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I'm kind of with Jason. There's been a lot going on, and my late night stuff has been mostly just kind of escapism. Although Rain and I have been also playing tons of this game, Pokemon Snap.
Yep.
And that's been a fun, cathartic, just, what's the game? You take pictures of Pokemon and you try to get the best pictures. And, that's... But it's fun. Like, it sounds ridiculous. I played it on the Nintendo 64 when I was working on the SpongeBob game that I was the animator, and we played a ton of it. And it sounds really dumb if you try to trash talk, because trash talking amounts to things like, take a better picture of a Squirtle than that. It sounds really stupid, but it's kind of fun. But yeah, that's mainly been the thing. Yeah, no, it's, and again, I don't have an ego about any of this. I'm sure that, probably I've lost a lot of the mystique by, like, being a horror fan who's like, man, mostly I'm playing Pokemon Snap. That's, I don't know. It's whatever. It's like it's very low stress, that kind of thing.
If it makes you feel better, that's what the cool kids at school are doing. The cool kids at school have hidden their Nintendo Switches in their backpacks and put them inside calculator covers so they look like a calculator. And they're playing Pokemon Snap or Animal Crossing. That's what they're doing.
Ray and I also play Animal Crossing. That's the thing, is like I'm literally at my job. A lot of times I am literally twice the age of some of my coworkers. But it's always strange to me because for whatever reason, I'm still watching all of those pretty much the same movies and playing pretty much the same games. Like, that's just been a constant. That's how I am.
My fourth hour and I had an entire... we wasted a class hour arguing over the merits of the Star Wars movies in order, which are the best ones, whether or not Rey should have started the Grey Jedi Order, whether or not R2-D2 is, secretly a Sith. Literally, we're all watching the same movies, and I'm like, I was your age when the quote unquote new ones came out. Like, this is insane.
No, I love
They've
that.
watched all the Clone Wars.
Nice. And also, today was the first day that I was able to really spend time and go back to the jam room that we have because being vaccinated. So I was cleaning it out, ready to take all of the band equipment that's been, all the amps and everything back to there and start writing the next Deserts of Mars album. So I was hanging out with my guitarist. So that's some healing. And I look forward to what I call volume therapy, which is, things are bad. I am going to go play and sing extremely loudly right now, which hasn't been a thing I could really do because I live in, suburbia now. And, so cranking up an amp to ludicrous volumes while, singing into a mic hasn't been a thing. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. So, hopefully later in the year, we'll also be in the studio with the new Deserts of Mars tunes. So that'll be good.
Hey.
But that's where, that's all the stuff I've been doing lately.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Let's see. It was Julia, Tony, Leigh. What about you?
Okay, so endorsements. Please, everyone, now that the world is starting to open back up, if you're vaccinated and or if you're not vaccinated but you're safely wearing a mask and social distancing, go to your farmers markets. Go tip the buskers. Go listen to some live music. Please go to a live theater performance. Please go and support your local performing artists, because we are dying. We are not having a great time. And we not only do we need your support, but gosh, we need to be doing our work again. We need to be working again. So please go support those things. I highly endorse them. If you don't already, please listen to the Castle of Horror podcast, because it's awesome. And
that's fine.
Thank you.
That's so sweet.
I have a top 5 horror podcast lists, and these are what I listen to. And you guys are number 1. But if you're out there and you wonderful people listening need other stuff when Jason isn't posting other awesome stuff to listen to, I can highly recommend The Faculty of Horror, Alex West and Andrea Subasati, because they really dive deep into psychological, sociological, feminist theory, all these cool things about horror, but they're also just really awesome horror gals. The Evolution of Horror, Mike Mercer from London, England. So you get to listen to a really lovely British accent for an hour. And he has some incredible guests. And yeah, so if you're looking for more things to listen to, can really highly recommend those. And yeah, Deserts of Mars, you should listen to them, and you should read Halloween Man.
And thanks
have you back.
Yeah, thanks also for bringing that up, because I'm starting to go, like, now we have a few venues that are doing as safe as possible, shows, and so that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to. And some friends of mine have started to be able to play out again. So thank you again for helping, because that's something I've definitely missed. We released our EP not too long before lockdown. So that this whole time we haven't been able to tour or do or play shows even to promote that. So thank you so much. I agree. Wear a mask, be safe, do what you need to do for yourself and others. If there's a place that's having socially distant shows and really putting forth the effort, like, thank you so much, because definitely we want to see people out there, and I hope that things continue to get better so that we can continue to do that.
Yeah, I know my gig season is going to be really weird this summer, but I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm going to make the most of it that I can and play as many venues as I can and just try and get people coming back out and supporting things.
And what's the name of your group, or is it a group or a band? What is it?
So there's like 4 different ones. I play in the Mendon Farmers Market Pickup Band, which is literally whoever shows up, pick up an instrument, let's play.
Fantastic.
Oh, nice.
And that's the most fun, because it's just a jam session. It's just a jam session at the farmers market, and often we get paid in rhubarb or muffins or whatever the vendors have available is great. And then when it's just me, I call myself Matham House, because it's never just me. I always talk somebody else into coming and playing with me. And then whenever it's me and Phil, it's Gleeful, Lee and Phil, Gleeful. And then occasionally I moonlight for other groups whenever there's a spot or a space or room for me, and I just love to get together with people and make good music or bad music, as long as we're having fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, we played it. There's a place called The Parlor, and they pay well enough if you get enough people in, but we have played for pizza. So I
play for pizza. I'm coming back to Austin. Sounds good. Play for pizza.
Yeah.
There.
The Parlor is amazing, and they have really good pizza. And very early on, they've moved around, and there's different ones, but the one we played at, that was part of that was at least you were going to get compensated with pizza. And so our very early Deserts of Mars gigs, and I would love to do that again, actually, like, because their pizza's really good. I would totally, absolutely do that.
I'm hoping for some weddings, because I love wedding food. That's always a really good time.
Yeah,
Get paid a little bit, and then wedding food.
I used to do more structured, choirs. I've sung for some weddings, stuff like that. But then in the last few years, I've been doing a cappella improv singing, which is so fun. So I'm really looking forward to getting back and doing some more of that, because that's a super fun thing. And it was very much against my comfort. Now it's in my comfort zone, but it was out of my comfort zone for a while, because I was so used to being told, this is the music, this is how you sing it, this is where you're going to stop, this is where you're going to breathe. And a cappella improv is the complete opposite. It's like, okay, we're just doing whatever, you be creative. It's very cool. I mean, there's still structure to it, but it's very loose structure.
That sounds so awesome. That sounds like so much fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you for that recommendation, by the way, because it's so funny you would say that. And now I want to go out of my way to, like, Julia and I need to get back to listen to comedy. And yesterday, my younger daughter and I had the coolest darn experience in a while. I mean, we Saturday afternoon, and she had been studying, and I said, let's go get some ice cream. So we went down to near the University of Denver campus and went and got some not Haagen-Dazs, so the Ben & Jerry's. And then we start walking around the campus, and then we heard these people singing. So we walked towards the singing and sat down in the grass and just listened to this a cappella concert that was going on with these different groups from the college. It was the coolest, just random live music experience, and it was a really good time. So that was neat. I nothing new to endorse other than Where the Crawdads Sing, which I really enjoyed. I know I often wonder, should we endorse something that was literally a New York Times #1 bestseller? I mean, do they need the help? But it was very good.
I mean, who cares if it needs help? Like, if it's something you dig.
MCU movies all the time, and they definitely don't need my help.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, Crawdads Sing, that was a while ago. So no, that's a great to endorse that. And
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 you should definitely listen to Leigh's audiobook of Night of the Bookman. Seriously. Well, first of all, because I wrote Night of the Bookman, and the new one is going to be coming out like whatever at the end of this year.
Oh, it is it? We better talk about timing on that.
So you got to get caught up on that. But you should listen for Leigh's hilarious reading of the book. I really enjoyed it. I love
to read the book. It's very fantastic.
Yeah, because there's this bizarre little living gingerbread man who has a thick German accent, and it's just
I was telling Leigh that I'm terrible about reading Jason's books because I don't really like reading fiction because I have to, and so I tend to listen to audiobooks, and so now there's an audiobook. So yay, I listened to it with great joy.
It was really fun. I can't wait to do it again. And thank you again because somebody else listened to it, and now I've got someone saying, "Hey, are you free?" Like,
oh, good.
No, but I'll make time.
That's
I get to read more books, and no one can tell me that I can't because it's a job. Great.
I'm super excited about that. That is wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay, that brings us to the end of the Gaslight retrospective, which was extremely fun. We will be back very, very soon. Leigh, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, if you were compelled or offended by anything that we said, come to the Facebook page and let us know all about it, because we would
if you're
love
still
to...
listening after over 2 hours.
Yes. Right. So everyone have a fantastic evening. You've brought a lot of joy to my life this evening, and it's made it all the better. So I will talk to you all soon. Bye, everybody.
Good night. Thanks, Leigh.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.